Do you remember those websites from the 1990s? Yeah, I'm talking about those websites. The ones that stood out as being overly flashy, almost a novelty of their own, despite them often representing a pre-existing brand.
You got mail.
Assuming you are even old enough to remember the early days of the internet, it's easy to remark on how strange these websites were. Their vibe, form, even entire purpose of existing exhibits an attitude of online culture that feels almost lost to time. Something pretty much non-existent in today's mainstream online space. The internet is just so different from what it used to be. Now, I have talked in the past about the reasons why this change has occurred over time. There are several, but at least knowing the fundamentals of them will help us better understand, as well as appreciate some of these iconic 90s websites that have since completely changed beyond recognition, or have even been lost to time entirely. These early websites were experimental, they were fun, almost careless, and also had an overwhelming emphasis on younger audiences. Today, we're going to talk about them and how they all changed. By the way, quick tangent, if you're wondering about the background, right now I am at the Casbah Coffee Club in Liverpool. It is owned by Pete Best's family, and it is where the Beatles regularly stayed from 1960 to 1962. Yes, I am in the very room where the most influential rock band of all time regularly slept, and I'm making a YouTube video. Sorry to piss on your graves, boys. Now, I think one of the greatest, most memorable examples of a quintessential 90s website would be, of course, Nick.com. If any website better encapsulated that distinction between web and brand, it was this one. Heck, Nickelodeon as a whole is a cultural landmark for many kids who grew up in the 90s. It also launched at the perfect time. October of 1995. This year was a turning point for the World Wide Web. Thanks to the release of Windows 95 and the growing popularity of service providers such as America Online, the internet became much easier to use and much more commercialized, and saw mass adoption within everyday households. Much like Yahoo at the time, AOL provided a list of websites listed by category that you could access. This was great for people navigating the web for the very first time and didn't know where to start other than on the webpage of their provider. One of these pages, of course, was Nickelodeon. Fortunately, at first, you needed to be an AOL member in order to use it. Kids were actually a great demographic for technology, since they were going to be the ones to grow up with it more than anybody. Though in 1997, Nick would officially become its own website, the Nick.com that we came to recognize. The webpage featured a ton of games, which were growing increasingly more powerful thanks to the rise of Flash media. It also included exclusive content of the Nick Studio, TV shows, even a submission box to write to your favorite Nick stars. They eventually introduced something called You Pick Live, which was a programming block on the channel where users could log onto the site and vote for which shows they wanted to watch. The winning choice would then get airtime. Thanks to the internet and brilliant marketing from the Nick team, kids had this newfound power and agency that was pretty much inconceivable before, and was further amplified by the channel bug in the corner that promoted the website. Its fun and energetic presence, efficiency, and constant media exposure made Nick.com an online hub for many 90s kids. This website would become much more complex throughout the 2000s, but as smartphones began to dominate the space, things started to change. Due to their small screens, smartphones require much more simple UI designs, especially when it came to online navigation outside of an app. Because of this, along with the decline of Flash media, which I've made an entire video about, the standard for web design began to shift towards much more simplified web pages. So yeah, the Nick.com website certainly does still exist and even still has games, but it isn't quite the same. The page has a much less kid-friendly, much more professional vibe to it. Whether this is a good thing or a bad thing is obviously up to the individual's preference, but the Nick.com of today certainly is different and serves a different role than it did at its inception. What good is navigating the internet if you don't have a cool web browser to do it on? Well, today we're going to answer that question using Opera. The future of web browsing has never looked better. Oh, gosh. First off, Opera really helps make the online experience personalized by letting you add your own themes. You can choose between Classic, Aurora, or Midsommar. Ooh, spooky. You can even do endless combinations of these and pick your own colors, sounds, animations, and more to really make your browsers look unique to you. Opera's design also puts a huge emphasis on multitasking. Opera's split screen lets you view two tabs side by side in the same browser window. Compare documents, stream while chatting, or multitask without juggling windows. And also using something called tab traces and tab islands. With tab traces, you can keep track of recently visited tabs. The darker the underscore, the more recently you visited it. And tab islands basically let you create tabs within a tab, which you can sort by category. And as you're surfing the web, you can also go surfing Safari. Opera's floating music player lets you play or skip songs without interrupting your browsing. Pop it out and move it anywhere, even outside the browser. Gosh, I love Rush. Can't believe they wrote Tom Sawyer. Only them. No one else has ever written Tom Sawyer. And by downloading it directly from the link in the description and pinned comment, you can get started with Opera today. See, that's how excited I am. I just started puberty backwards. Be sure to check it out. Sites like Nick.com showcase that a company website didn't just have to be an extension of the brand, but its own separate thing altogether. This was the early experimental days of the internet. There were no rules. As far as things go, you could create a whole other world, because that's what it was, the cyber world. So then comes another shining example, Blockbuster.com. Did you know, kids, that before there was Netflix, if you wanted to rent a video, you actually had to go to the store and buy a disc? Yes, obviously Blockbuster Video was around during a time where the internet was still too new to commercially support large amounts of bandwidth for something like movies and television shows. So its business practices stuck to the traditional way of doing things. You would walk into the store, rent out the physical copy of the media you wanted to borrow, and you would return it before a specified deadline, much like a library, except obviously you had to pay for it. But much like with Nick.com, the internet was the place for creating experimental environments within your limited means. What if Blockbuster created a digital store as well? One which emulated the look and feel of their real life stores. This is more than just an online page full of references and convenient ways to buy things. No, this is a page that's fun, where you can explore and find cool little buttons and gadgets. You hopped over to the music table to navigate your favorite tunes. To navigate the games, you clicked the TV and game controller. The entire thing is extremely basic in its functionality. Pretty much just a giant image with invisible buttons on it to make it look more interactive. But the spirit is there, and so is that ambition to create another world within this one. Blockbuster would tone it down on this approach as the years went on, and their website started to look more like a website. Now, as you know, Blockbuster just couldn't keep up with the times, and they went under. That alone is an entire story for another video. But the main culprit was that they just couldn't properly adapt to online streaming, and their business model quickly became antiquated. Though it is interesting to see a company fully embrace and experiment with this new mainstream medium of communication while having no idea that it would contribute to their demise years later. Naturally, this practice of creating a website that was an extension of a particular brand was becoming the norm. While the internet was growing in popularity in the 90s, so was coffee, particularly coffee culture. Coffee was no longer just something you ordered at the diner or bought at the grocery store in powder form. Coffee was now a lifestyle, a commitment. Something that oddly complemented coffee was the computer. You had internet cafes where you could order a coffee and surf the web at the same time. It is these combined forces that led to the massive rise in popularity of Starbucks. And their website, Starbucks.com, was once again meant to be an online version of that experience. You've got a page full of warm colors abstract art, almost rustic typography, not all that different from the kind of things that you would see walking into a Starbucks back in the 90s. You could learn about the type of coffees that Starbucks has got brewing up for you, the history behind it, and it's all accompanied by these snug colors and animations. It's the digital equivalent of sitting in a log cabin next to a fireplace on a cold winter night. It's a look and feel that elevates coffee beyond just a beverage, but as a work of art. Effectively capturing this feeling in the digital space arguably only strengthened this computer and coffee relationship. But as demonstrated earlier, this distinct look didn't last forever. Like all these other websites, Starbucks would also take this minimalist, more homogenized, but professional look that we tend to recognize today. Though I do think the early version of the Starbucks website really embodies the atmosphere of their stores at the time. The kind of place where you could make yourself at home and enjoy a nice beverage while doing the more simple, leisurely things. I actually just started reading On the Road from Jack Kerouac for the first time, and I'm fully aware that this is not exactly an original or profound thought, but this all really reminds me of the coffee house culture that the Beatniks partook in.
I'd call this one Diagnosis.
Where they prioritized bohemian activities and art, particularly literature being the one that stands out. Starbucks essentially popularized an elevated version of that, where now the actual coffee was just as free-spirited. It only makes sense that bookstore culture could complement it as well. Heck, many bookstore chains would even include a coffee shop inside of them, which leads me to more of an honorable mention. Borders.com. Borders was a huge bookstore at this time. It was popular when I was growing up. I actually recently found a Borders receipt for something that I bought in 2007. Seeing as I'm in the UK right now, I can't exactly show it to you, so you're just gonna have to take my word for it. But I do have a photo of a Borders gift card that I got in 2008. I took this photo not too long ago. While Borders.com definitely looked more like a website than anything else, I think it still has that warm cafe kind of look that the Starbucks website did. And I don't think that's a coincidence. Unfortunately, I couldn't get the surviving archives of this website to fully load properly, but you can get an idea of the kind of vibe that I'm talking about. It featured some pretty cool pages, such as ones for movies and music. These listed some of the latest releases, which you could buy online, truly taking advantage of this new concept of online shopping. Again, these pages aren't nearly as immersive as the previous ones. Maybe that's intentional since they know their audience tends to read more. But nonetheless, it adds a whole new perspective to it when you understand the historical context as well as the eventual fate of this beloved bookstore. Yeah, Borders no longer exists. They completely ceased operations in 2011, meeting a pretty similar fate to Blockbuster in that they were slow to adapt to the times. But seeing the site as it once was really provides a look into a time where the online world and traditional world still comfortably coexisted. As the number of these unique websites continued to grow, people then began to find ways to buy and sell them. In 1998, you have the launch of Pets.com. Now, this is a pretty strange story because despite being exceptionally ordinary, this was a website that attracted so many people for none of the reasons you might be thinking. It basically encompassed all those 90s internet tropes that we've been discussing, but it gets weirder. At this time, the internet enters the stock market. Here is a chart put together by Brew Market showing the initial public offer for Pets.com. In February of 2000, it was around $11, and it went to almost nothing a year later. This was a 70% nosedive that cost around $30 billion. What on earth happened? In the late 1990s, the dot-com bubble starts to form. Now, I have talked about the dot-com bubble crash in intricate detail in the past, but the main culprit of it was over-speculation within the internet market. Because truthfully, Pets.com really wasn't that remarkable of a website. It was an online shopping site for buying pet toys. Pretty basic stuff. What made it stand out was the use of these tropes. very bright colors, themed typography, cartoony illustrations. It really does capture the feeling of a real-life pet store. Most notably, Pets.com also had a fun sock puppet mascot, which began appearing on the website and even on television in 1999. The business already had a lot of problems with its setup, the main one being that their entire system of shipping products just wasn't commercially viable. So what did investors do? Ignored it. Because some of the top websites in the world started on the spot with absolutely nothing, like Amazon. In fact, Amazon was one of their main investors, which by association increased Pets.com as a novelty. We of course call this survivorship bias because it fails to also consider the many e-businesses that failed and became forgotten at this time. But investors just didn't care. Plus, the site has a Pet of the Day page. Aw, isn't that cute? However, with time, this unsustainable business model caught up with them, and Pets.com was unable to generate a hefty profit that could justify its overly inflated price with investors. So Pets.com shut down, and all that invested money was now gone. Pets.com's animated page and bubbly personality has made it somewhat of the poster child of the dot-com bubble story. But so many websites met a very similar fate, which contributed to one of the most devastating economic crashes in 25 years. Did you know that Facebook existed in the 90s? Well, sort of. If you typed in facebook.com into your web browser in 1998, it would redirect you to aboutface.com. This was what you could call an early example of a modern-day social media site. It was a database of people that companies could set up for their workplaces. Each employee had their own page, profile picture, biography, and so on. The idea was that if people working in an office saw someone walk by and was like, "Who was that guy?" they could just look it up. A Facebook was a rare word to describe these paper directories of people. Does this entire concept sound familiar? Facebook, the one that we recognize today, basically took this exact concept in 2004 and refined it. Instead of focusing on workplaces, it focused on colleges and started off as an exclusive invite-only website. This added desirability and a bit of mystique to it. So demand for Facebook went up. It was basically a cleaner, simpler, more professional version of MySpace, so the familiarity angle was strong as well. The list goes on and on, but these are some of the things that made Facebook insanely popular. But it's interesting to see just how many similarities About Face has. However, it just wasn't nearly as interactive as Facebook was, and just did not target the right demographic. And so, it just faded away into obscurity. Going back to our discussion of survivorship bias, I think About Face is a great example of one of the startups that just didn't work and became almost completely forgotten to time, with its absence serving as evidence to this fallacy. But this website, along with the ones we've mentioned and countless others, also serve as a time capsule into a completely different online world, one which had a different look, feel, and purpose. Its short-lived era gave life to a much more complex, connected world, and it is up to us what we make of it. If you would like to see my video on the rise and fall of Flash websites, you can check that out right here. A special thanks to all my Patreon supporters, patreon.com/nationsquid. If you are feeling extra generous today, you can also buy me a coffee. It is oh so appreciated. Thank you for watching, everyone.